Good afternoon for those of us in Europe. Good evening for those of us in Taipei. Today, as we commemorate the United Nations International Day of Living in Peace, I would again like to add my voice to countless scholars and victims of Taiwanese inability to live up to its own covenants regarding human rights. I thank CESNUR and Human Rights Without Frontiers for this opportunity. During my studies on peace negotiations years ago, I was taught by the man who trained the peace negotiators for the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Their aim was to find a way out of the deadlock between the trapped Palestinians and the Israeli policies. The objective was to prepare them for what was later called the Camp David Peace Accords, which began in September 1978 with Menachem Begin, Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat, and Yasser Arafat. As my professor tried to find the argument that was to bring about the difference between conflict and peace, and the one that would be the core of the negotiation stratagem, he noticed something very awkward, something he had not expected at all. Neither side, neither the Israeli government nor the Palestinians, were aiming for peace. At the same time, war and conflict was not desirable either. Their argument was quite practical. In both Islam, as well as in Jewish culture, wrestling and conflict are a necessary part of life. Without conflict, there would be no wrestle. And without wrestle, there would be no merit for heavenly salvation. The objective was not to flee from conflict or get rid of it, but to learn from it and find a way to control it. It was all about conflict management. After all, there will always be conflict. The strategy they used, therefore, in the Camp David Peace Accords were about managing the conflict so that it would not get out of hand and work for peace of the next generation. At the same time, there are other definitions of peace as well. Some just want the avoidance of war. For Christians, the notion of peace is about inner tranquility, the peace Jesus taught. For many Asians, it's more about harmony with oneself and one's environment. In any case, it should never be desired to unnecessarily confront or harm people or nature in exchange for personal gain or favor. And we have much to learn from religious groups about the meaning of peace. I applaud this International Day of Living Together in Peace that we are celebrating today, so that we can at least talk about it and find out what we can all do about bringing it about. A case in point is that of Taiwan. On March 31st, 2009, Taiwan's legislature ratified two of the most important international conventions on the development of human rights. On the 31st of March, the legislature debated and ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights on 31st of March of that year. Counting from 1967, the date when they ratified it, when Taiwan signed the two conventions, makes it clear how difficult it had been for them to get to the point of turning them into domestic law. Yet, having laws that protect human rights and defending human rights are two different things. Today, we will talk more in detail about how this plays out. According to Amnesty International, for example, Taiwan still has some distance to go towards the rights of indigenous peoples, the LGBTI peoples, migrants, and the penalty of death. And my own research shows that there is a serious breach of respect for human rights law by the Taiwanese government, tax authorities, and the Taiwanese political leadership to make use of its existing domestic and international law. It is a case where the Tai Ji Men have been unduly taxed, exploited, pressured, and tortured for the past 25 years or more. For the Tai Ji Men to complain is unusual. It is a peaceful organization with no harm intended, with the aim of bringing harmonization within each human being, as well as their environment. The struggle of people they teach is an inner struggle and not a social one. And yet, we see them having to fight for their moral and legal rights against elements in the finance departments of Taiwan. Their aim is not to attack, demoralize, or dominate, but to help Taiwan to come grips with its own laws and international conventions. During this webinar, we will see some videos and hear some experts and disciples of Tai Ji Men to see what impact this injustice is done and to understand why in Taiwan one sees peaceful demonstrations at the moment. We will hear from Massimo Intravigna, Marco Respenti, Pierluigi Zoccatelli, Willy Fautré, and Tatjana Koppele-Sveli. I would like us to now turn to the first video, which will introduce the third report on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Thank you very much.
The third International Review Conference on Taiwan's two covenants began on May 9th with a week-long conference. The opening ceremony was held at 10 a.m. on May 9th at the Zhang Rongfa Foundation International Convention Center. Premier Su Zhenchang of the Executive Yuan, Chairperson Chen Ju of the National Human Rights Commission, and Minister Cai Qingxiang of the Ministry of Justice attended the event.
人权是永远的努力，人权必须永远的追求。
我们希望这个开下来的这个会议这几天，我们可以从我们的报告中，各位国际的专家们给我们不吝指教。
Civil society organizations spoke about education rights, women's rights, migrant worker rights, life and property rights, and religious beliefs, among other topics. The two covenants, known as the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, were formally incorporated into domestic law on December 10, 1998, during President Ma Ying-jeou's presidency, and are important indicators of Taiwan's human rights progress. The review is held regularly once in 4 years. This time is the third time that international human rights experts have been invited to Taiwan to review the current status of the implementation of the two covenants. Civil society organizations have slammed the Taiwan government for failing to fully implement human rights protection, accusing the Taiwan government of avoiding its responsibilities, with the administrative branch kicking the can down the road as one of the main reasons for Taiwan's human rights failure.
这个今天，世界公民总会这个还有台湾财经行为研究协会都提出，对于国家人权委员会的一个功能的一个质疑那也提出这个太极门个案已经这个延续26年，一直没办法得到有效的救济。
太极门案呢，已经悬而未决26年。那这样子的案子呢，在国际人权两公约在国内施行。 那个国内法化施行了这么久，还没有办法被解决，这就很明显的看出来，根本没有进步。
像是太极门的案件，它是属于宗教团体，也是武术修行团体，但是其他的所有武术团体及宗教团体都没有被非法课税，唯独只有针对太极门这个案件，那这就是一个很严重。 国家用税务的手段来侵害、歧视人民，而且这个案件长达了26年。
最基本人权都是饱受威胁，尤其是太极门是一个超过上万人的团体，都受到人权迫害。那我们今天在最后也是有呼吁，也有跟委员提出一个要求，就是希望他们可以将太极门案还有这些人权迫害案件，就是 纳入结论性意见报告里面，希望他们真的要落实转型正义这个部分，以及要恢复所有受害者的名誉。那以他们税务就是税包利为手段去迫害的强的民产，应该要真正的归还人民。
The reporter is currently in the auditorium of the Ministry of Justice, where the Taiwan's third international ICCPR/CESNUR review meeting was held in the afternoon of May 13th to present its concluding observations and recommendations. The press conference was hosted by the Minister of State in Executive Yuan, Bing-Cheng Luo. After 3 days of examination, the commissioners concluded 92 observations and suggestions. They indicated that torture is the intentional and purposeful infliction of physical or mental suffering on another person, suggesting that Taiwan should incorporate the crime of torture into the criminal law and have independent units investigate the possible targets of torture.
Virginia came to participate in all three, and she lamented that she had observed no progress in human rights education in Taiwan for more than 10 years, and she called it a failure. We, the entire people and government of Taiwan, can reflect on the fact that we must not let human rights violations happen again, and that we must allow injustices like the Tai Ji Men, which have suffered for more than a quarter of a century, to be rectified.
Conclusion: nowadays, Taiwan is still using various kinds of torture to oppress its people, which shows that there is a big gap between the officials and the people's awareness of human rights in the country. It is expected the government will come up with a concrete action plan so that human rights can really take a big step forward. Reporter in Taipei.
Let me introduce to you Professor Massimo Introvigne from Italy. He will be sharing with you his interpretation of what's going on at this moment. Professor Introvigne, please take the floor.
Thank you, and welcome to the United Nations International Day of Living Together in Peace. We need an international day for living together in peace because living in peace together is not easy. It is not easy, as we all see internationally. It is not easy among citizens of the same country, and it is not easy even within smaller communities. As some of you who were there know, including our host, Hans Noth, earlier this month I visited the city of Leuven in Belgium, where an international conference on freedom of religion or belief, co-organized by Tatiana, who will give the conclusions today, was held. And in 2 sessions, the Tai Ji Men case was also discussed by both scholars and busy disciples of Tai Ji Men. It was a busy conference, but between the last session and the conference final dinner, I found the time to visit a chapel in Leuven, where Father Damien de Voister, whom the Catholic Church has canonized as a saint, is buried. And the story of his life is told through panels and pictures. The reason I wanted, when in Leuven, to go to this place is when I was a child, I had seen several times the 1959 Spanish movie, Molokai, the Cursed Island, a movie about Father Damien, and it was a favorite of Catholic schools movie theaters. In 1999, there has been a high budget remake with famous actors, but I still prefer, perhaps for reason of nostalgia, the black and white version of 1959. Now, why I mentioned this? Because the story of Father Damien is a powerful example of what I mentioned before, that even in comparatively small communities, living together in peace is not easy. And in fact, it's only possible whether conscience as a moral compass is followed by all. So in a nutshell, the story is as this. Until as late as 1969, the United States confined those suffering from leprosy, which today is called Hansen's disease, to a colony in the inaccessible Kalaupapa Peninsula, in the island of Molokai in the Hawaiian archipelago. And it's very difficult to get there. On one side, there are very high mountains. On the other side, there is the sea and the highest sea cliffs in the world. So it serves as a sort of natural prison. Leopards, I use this term, even if now it's not politically correct, but it's the term it was used at that time, were literally dumped there, and periodically they were reached by supplies of water, food, and other goods, but they were largely left to their own devices. And based on what we know today was a false notion of the contagiousness of leprosy, very few visitors were allowed on the colony, and only for a few days. If they wanted to stay for longer than a few days, they know they will never be allowed to leave. One of the most famous visitors to this colony called Molokai, even if it was only a part of the Molokai island, was American writer Jack London. Before running away, he called the colony the pit of hell and the most cursed place on earth. Father Damien was a Belgian Catholic priest who decided he wanted to go to Molokai and spend his life with the lepers. And he arrived there in 1873, knowing he will never be allowed to leave, and he will die there. In fact, he contracted leprosy in 1884, not immediately, 11 years after he arrived, and died in Molokai in 1889. What I believe is very valuable in the 1959 movie, Molokai, is that it resisted the easy attempts of idealizing the life of the lepers in Molokai, because we can naively imagine that since they share the same suffering, they live together in peace. But that was not the case. There was no police in Molokai, and many lepers, not all, decided that since society had rejected them, they were free to reject the laws of society. And so life in the colony was dangerous. Unbelievably, alcohol made its way there, and violence and sexual abuse were serious problems. So Jesus healed several lepers in the gospel, and the leper has been interpreted by biblical scholars also as a metaphor of what is fragile and dangerous in the human condition. And as historians have recognized, it was the cruelty of society that dumped them in Molokai as human garbage that created the problems of the Molokai colony. But what I want to emphasize today is that without anybody calling them to act with conscience, the lepers, or at least many of them, lost the connection with conscience, with these inner moral commands, and even the most basic respect of the laws disappeared. It was restored patiently by Father Damien, who not only assisted the lepers in their suffering, but called them to remember their conscience, to realize they were men and women of conscience and children of God, and act accordingly. And in the end, the lepers of Molokai really learned to live together in peace, so much so that when the colony was closed in 1969, some of the colonists decided to remain there. So the cursed island of Jack London had become a place they like to call home, and all this thanks to the conscientious revolution started by Father Damien. So the lesson of this story for us is that living together in peace cannot be taken for granted. Even those who share a misfortune, like Molokai's lepers, can ultimately not be able to live together in peace unless they discover the role of conscience. And this is precisely what Tai Ji Men and their founder, Dr. Hong Dao-tzu, keep teaching all around the world. It's as simple as that. Living together in peace is only possible through conscience. Is only possible by acknowledging conscience and acting with conscience. The painful experience of Tai Ji Men Dizzy is that they were not allowed to live together in peace with other Taiwanese and with their own government, because they encountered a prosecutor and bureaucrats who were not guided by conscience. Unlike the lepers of Molokai, the prosecutor and the bureaucrats in Taiwan were not compelled to act without conscience because of a hostile environment. They became on their own moral lepers, and moral lepers is an old English expression that today is no longer used because it may be offensive to those who suffer of the real physical Hansen's disease, the one called leprosy. But it remained true that something worse than leper comes into the scene when conscience is lost. And it remains true that order can only be restored by returning to conscience. So order was lost in the Tai Ji Men case because of bureaucrats without conscience, and order can only be restored, and living together in peace can be restored in the Tai Ji Men case by returning to conscience, which means returning to the basic principle of Tai Ji Men's teachings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Intervenor, for this very clear message about the lepers in Molokai and the fragility of people and the necessity of turning to our conscience. And of course, the law is something that is really important to help us teach that. We would now be very pleased to listen to Marco Rispenti, who is the director in charge of the Bitter Winter magazine, hopefully a well-known magazine for all of you. Mr. Rispenti, please take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Nord. Thank you, everyone. One of my mentors, the late Catholic Italian social thinker Giovanni Cantoni, founder of the group Alleanza Cattolica Catholic Alliance, and a master in wise boutade, used to say and often repeated, "I am just an introduction." Fond of chronologies, timelines, math, bibliographies, and footnotes, what he meant is that well begun is half done. And in his particular case, that if in writing or speaking you properly introduce your topic, set limits and boundaries, and define the object, the main task is already accomplished. It can be considered a version of the Latin locution rem tene verba sequentur, keep to the subject matter, the words will follow, but in the 4th century AD, Roman rhetorician Gaius Julius Victor, in his Ars Rhetorica, attributed to the great Marcus Porcius Cato, aptly known as Cato the Censor, Cato the Elder, and above all, Cato the Wise. Those Cato's words are even defined preceptum pene divinum, an almost divine command. Trying then to imitate the wisdom of the wise without belonging to that lot, I wish today to be an introduction myself, an introduction to the concept of peace. I am in fact convinced that whether we keep to the subject matter in the first place, our words will always follow fluently in any occasion. So what is peace? Peace is the most desirable of all human conditions. It's a retainer of paradise. When all human worries and griefs will be over, we will participate in the fullness of being with no unrest, anxiety, or disturbance. This is the goal that awaits us, or better, the completion we long for. Because human beings are tailored out of such fabric. That is to say that peace is our fate because peace is our origin. Our human being is creatively imagined out of peace, and peace is what we are made for. All troubles are in fact caused by the disruption of our original condition, which, as said, is our fabric and our fate as well. This is then quite a serious thing. Hard to say, many would think, if we listen to how this precious word is misused in too many occasions. Peace is the opposite of war, giving war the deepest of all meanings, but it is not just the absence of war. History is generous with societies where no war was fought and yet totally unpacific at the same time, even wretched and ravaged. Recent examples are Nazi Germany before 1939, no war, but no peace either. Soviet Union after World War II, no war, at least within its boundaries, but no peace ever. Communist China, today, no war, but no peace for sure. Only deeply peaceful men and women can build a truly pacific society, able to resist and last. This concept may seem obvious, but it is frequently misunderstood. And this misunderstanding is typical when people think that to achieve peace is enough to stop war. It is not. Maybe unfortunately, because it would be a relatively easy goal to obtain, but it is not. Peace is in fact a spiritual condition which may serve as the foundation of a virtuous social construction. Even more than that, it is a gift from God. Thus, to be enjoyed, it should be desired and searched and asked. Yes, first, peace should be dreamt and hoped and wanted. Secondly, it should be cultivated and nurtured and fed. Thirdly, it should be taught and communicated and passed on, even by pedagogical osmosis. What I mean is that we should educate ourselves and others, starting with our own children, to be peaceful people. Now, to be peaceful people means to be God-fearing, law-abiding, family-dedicated, hardworking, and life-enjoying men and women who seek fulfillment of one's individuality as vital elements of an organic community. In other words, peace is not granted, and we should never take it for granted. It needs to be defended. If you forgive one more time my passion for the good movies of the old days, let me recommend the great 1953 John Ford movie, The Quiet Man, starring John Wayne. Here we have an Irishman, the character of Sean Thornton, who wishes to live a good life, but is compelled to allow some temporary roughness to reinstitute tranquility. It sometimes happens. When a revolution deranges the order of the things, a counter-revolutionary action is necessary to restore the normality of peace. Again, there are plenty of historical tales, but nothing shows it better than the present situation in Ukraine. Peace is not just the absence of war, because in Ukraine, Ruski Mir or Pax Russa, i.e. Russian peace, means only deprivation of liberty, violence, and death, and so Ukrainian patriots have to fight a defensive war of resistance to reinstate and then preserve peace. Here we reach the verge of a key point. I underline it using, one more time, a favorite quote by Augustine of Hippo, which I already used in webinars and papers related to what we now call the Tai Ji Men case. Quote from Augustine, De Civitate Dei: "The peace of all things is the tranquility of order. Order is the distribution which allots things equal and unequal, each to in its own place." Let's repeat it once more. True peace is full justice. An early first conclusion of this introduction to peace of mind can be now drawn adapting two famous American sayings. The first is a popular aphorism, probably circulating since the 1930s, going like this, quote, "There ain't no such thing as a free lunch," end of quote. It reminds us that everything has its price and nothing is done for nothing. So also peace has its toll, and that is dedication, stubbornness, respect, a clear mind, a genuine spirit, the purity of the heart, and self-sacrifice. The second has been attributed to President Thomas Jefferson, but also to a variety of other famous authors. While the father of this quote remains uncertain as well as its exact syntax, its message is self-evident, quote, "The price of liberty is eternal vigilance," end of quote. Being liberty the precondition of peace, let's then repeat that as Sean Thornton, John Wayne, and Ukrainian freedom fighters teach us, the price of peace is eternal vigilance. Now, the title of today's webinar is Living Together in Peace with Tai Ji Men, and my today's 2 cents reminder of the true nature of peace hopes to illustrate it. For the response and inclination of Tai Ji Men DZ to a more than a quarter of a century blatant persecution and calumny by such a powerful adversary as a government or some of its corrupt branches and officials hiding behind the magnitude and might of an entire state has been a more than a quarter of the century Pacific resilience, a more than a quarter of the century Pacific endurance, a more than a quarter of the century Pacific patience, yes, and more than a quarter of the century peace in face of war. What has in fact Tai Ji Men done for more than a quarter of a century in front of injustice and violence? Every single day, for more than 25 years, they walked without fear in face of evil. All whose lives they touched were made better for knowing them, and they always returned goodness and misdeeds alike with good. Tai Ji Men preached and lived the peace of the heart and taught it to everyone within and without the movement, confronting false accusations and open mistreatment. They worked not toward bringing heaven on earth, but volunteered to be heralds of paradise, announcing peace as the most desirable of all human and social conditions. They devoted their own time, and their own work and their own money to this noble project? The Federation of World Peace and Love, established by Tai Ji Men Shifu Dr. Hong Tao Tse, testifies this, beginning from its very name. Tai Ji Men had and has also to bear and endure the false peace of a mere absence of war, using the power of taxes, which is a system theoretically devised to help and support citizens. Some corrupt branches and officials of the Taiwanese government declared an absence of war against Tai Ji Men that caused them pain and suffering and loss of peace, while the persecutors smiled and even laughed. But when the police arrested Tai Ji Men, Shifu, and Dizzy, used violence and brutality against them, and seized their property and sacred land, not only the absence of war, but war itself was declared against Tai Ji Men. And Tai Ji Men resisted and reacted without shooting a shot, without beating anyone, without any assault or act of terrorism, in brief, without not the slightest example of violence ever. They bore everything peacefully. Of course, knowing the lesson of Sean Thornton, even without knowing the movie about Sean Thornton, they knew and know that there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, and that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So they rolled back injustice as best as they could and can, challenging harassers in courts, demonstrating in the streets, and calling for international attention on their case. Always peacefully, because peace, as the spiritual precondition of good things, is a tenet deeply rooted in the Tai Ji Men's creed. I love stories, and here is yet another one. There was a Swedish entrepreneur whose brother died in 1888 in Cannes, France. A French journal got all wrong and published an obituary of that entrepreneur, thinking wrongly him dead instead of his brother. The words in that obituary were as harsh as they could ever be. The man was called the merchant of death, who, quote, became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, end of quote. The Swedish entrepreneur was so impressed that he started worrying about his legacy once he was truly dead. So in his last will, he decided to assign some of his big money to the public recognition of peace in the world. You have already guessed. The Swedish entrepreneur was Alfred Nobel. He had invented lethal dynamite, and he established the Nobel Prize for Peace. As the Smithsonian Magazine put it, sometimes sloppy journalism is the source of good. In early February this year, two of the most important groups of the Uyghur diaspora, egregiously representing a people which is violently persecuted by the neo-post-national communist Chinese regime for their religion and ethnicity, always redressing evil with good, were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of their tireless work done through personal suffering, for peace through justice against the arrogance of an evil power. They are the Uyghur Human Rights Project and Campaign for Uyghurs, two good friends, if I may add. Nobel Prizes are awarded each year. There is enough space and time both for our Uyghur friends and for the Tai Ji Men. I now appeal to all who cherish and treasure religious freedom and liberty, justice and peace, kalos kaya gatos, of the beautiful, the good, and the virtues of classical Greece all in one, as well as friendship and charity, considering all these as the best gifts that one can give others in life. Let us nominate Tai Ji Men for the Nobel Peace Prize. Let us appeal to parliamentarians and academics, for only them, as rules require, can nominate Tai Ji Men for the Nobel Peace Prize. And let us call also the Taiwanese government to openly support the candidacy of these Taiwanese patriots who never did any harm. If it does, the Taipei government will clearly demonstrate that the suffering that some of its corrupt branches and officials caused and cause to Tai Ji Men is only a sad mistake. If it happens, justice will be restored and peace will prevail for Tai Ji Men and for all who suffer the lack of true peace inflicted by warmongers of all sorts. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco, for this very well explained principle on peace and how you defined it. You talked about it being a retainer for paradise. You talked about no anxiety or disturbance, and you mentioned that peace is our fabric and fate because it's our origin. And then you talked about it being searched for and asked and cultivated and fed and passed on. True peace, you said, is full justice. Exactly the type of justice that the Tai Ji Men were deprived of. And thank you for your nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize for the Tai Ji Men. We appreciate your words, and we are looking forward to listening to Mr. Luigi Zoccatelli, Professor of Sociology and Religion at the Pontifical Salesian University. Please take the floor.
Thank you, President Note. Thank you to everyone. 20 years ago, in 2002, I presented at the yearly international conference of CESNUR, the Center for Studies on New Religions, which was held in this year in Salt Lake City and Provo, Utah, a paper on what I called the esoteric paradigm. Later, I returned to this concept in several articles and in my classes. I suggested that the esoteric paradigm may be a general category with clear differences from the religious paradigm, encompassing the very diverse movements and phenomena scholars discuss under the broad term esotericism. In rereading that paper today, I noticed that all my examples were taken from Western esotericism. Indeed, there are chairs, reviews, and even an international association of scholars that include in their names Western esotericism. However, in recent years, Western esotericism is becoming a contested label. Some maintains it has the advantage of identifying a tradition scholars have now studied and circumscribed for decades. Others regard the label as ethnocentric and claim there are no reasons to regard esotericism as a specifically Western phenomenon, since there are esoteric currents in the tradition of Asia and other continents as well. We will certainly not solve this debate today. However, I would like to suggest is that Tai Ji Men's unique approach to the theme of peace is also part of what I called the esoteric paradigm. Perhaps this may help exploring the extensions of the paradigm beyond the West. On September 21, 1999, a devastating earthquake hit Taiwan. 4 years thereafter, on September 25, Tai Ji Men held the event Love of the World, a gathering for world peace, at Taipei Municipal Stadium. The event had been planned beforehand, but the earthquake gave to the audience, which included government officials, academics, and leaders of different religions, a sense of urgency. After the event, the leader of Tai Ji Men, Dr. Hong Tao-tse, developed the idea of the bell of world peace and love. He clearly indicated that the bell carries a special meaning in both Western and Eastern traditions. He said that the sounds of the bell in Western churches and in Eastern temples remind people to listen to their inner voice. The sound of the bell represents people's true hearts, social harmony, a nation's success, and world peace. End of quote. Those of world leaders, including presidents, prime ministers, religious authorities, and scholars, have rung Tai Ji Men bells during Dr. Hong's world tours. While it can be appreciated just as a beautiful message of love, for the Tai Ji Men Disi, the disciples, it has a deeper meaning, which is in fact esoteric. At the core of Tai Ji Men worldview is the idea that a harmony between yin and yang, heaven and earth, earth and qi, the energy, was part of the original purity of human beings. It was since lost, but it can be restored together with peace. Ringing the bell is part of a movement restoring the world and humanity to its original purity. Although these are members of several different religions, Tai Ji Men is rooted in the tradition of esoteric Taoism. In this tradition, and indeed in many others, sacred objects may function as a catalyst of unseen energies and determine effects going well beyond what non-initiated may see or predict. Sacred sounds, in turn, may generate powerful waves of energy. The bell of peace is much more than a secular symbol of goodwill. It is a sacred artifact, each component of which has a precise esoteric meaning. The 5 colors of its stand, green, red, yellow, white, and blue, represent the 5 elements of the Taoist tradition: wood, fire, water, metal, and earth. On top of the bell, there is a crystal bowl whose interaction with the gold of the bell manifests the equilibrium of yin and yang. At the top of the bell, the 8 elements, Bagua, of the Chinese classic I Ching, are represented. They are the 8 components of the universe created by the original interaction of yin and yang. On the body of the bell, different animals that have a precise meaning in the Chinese exoteric traditions are represented. The mythical one-horned Qilin, lions, phoenixes, and dragons, the latter represented chasing a bear. The bell of world peace and love is a microcosm and, according to Tai Ji Men, has a mysterious but real correspondence with the macrocosm of the universe. That they know it or not, Disi believe that those who ring the bell enter into a powerful energetic current whose roots are in a millenarian Chinese tradition, for which the bell, as an esoteric artifact and sacred object, serves as a catalyst. On the one hand, Tai Ji Men's approach to a world of peace and love is part of an esoteric paradigm. On the other hand, ringing the bell is part of what, in another webinar of this series, has been called an effective citizen diplomacy, which achieves demonstrable results in a secular sphere. Several international politicians reported that ringing bell inspired them to effectively work for peace. That Tai Ji Men, praised not only by international, but also by Taiwanese politicians and chiefs of states for its commitment to world peace, is persecuted and harassed through taxes in Taiwan, is a paradox difficult to understand. But this point is discussed by other speakers in this same webinar. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Zoccatelli, for your clarity here. And I appreciate how you used or analyzed the Tai Ji Men as an esoteric paradigm. And you mentioned several elements, if I understood it correctly. Their approach to world peace is a form of esotericism itself. And you talked about their social support during calamities, and you talked about the bell ringing ritual, particularly as a call for international peace. Their strive for harmony between humans and the environment, and the symbolisms they use overall to develop world peace. I think a very good analysis and a good summary of, I think, what they stand for, if I am correct. We would now be very pleased to listen to Willy Vautret. He's the director and co-founder of Human Rights Without Frontiers. Willy, can I give you the floor?
Yes, thank you for passing on the stick to me for this second session that will also be fantastic with the contributions of the disease and very exciting all the time. But first of all, we will watch a short video entitled, if I'm correct with my pronunciation, Yu Chengdong, the most incorruptible official of the Qing dynasty.
Yu Chenglong, the most incorruptible official of Qing dynasty. Yu Chenglong was a Chinese civil servant who served during the Qing dynasty's Kangxi period. His career prospects were bleak. The ministry assigned him as a magistrate to the remote and unpopular county of Luocheng in South China. When he arrived, there were only 6 residents left in the city and no county office building, so he was forced to work in a dilapidated temple. Unlike previous magistrates, he did not resign and flee, but instead made it his mission to never aim at food and clothing, and vow not to ignore justice and conscience. Following that, local safety and security improved dramatically, and the exiled people began to return one by one. Yu Chenglong then requested subsidies from his superiors in order to provide food and farming tools to the people, lower taxes, and construct nursing homes and schools. He was recommended as outstanding because of his outstanding achievements, and he became a model of governance for officials. When the Kangxi emperor summoned him, he praised him as the most incorruptible official. When the court ordered the people of Hechu to cut down hard precious Phoebe for tribute as building materials for the imperial palace, he was the chief executive of Hechu in Sichuan, mid-China. Yu Chenglong was aware that Sichuan had witnessed the massacre of Zhang Xianzhong, a rogue bandit, at the end of the Ming dynasty, and that the people who remained could not afford such labor, so he filed several petitions, and finally the court agreed to abolish Hechu labor. While serving as the Fuzhou magistrate in southeast China, the Qing court issued the Sea ban on maritime trade, and border removal order, withdrawal of population from the coast, to cut off Cheng Kung's source of military supplies and arrested merchants who had business dealings with the Qing family. Cheng Kung, better known internationally as Kuxinga, was a Ming loyalist who fought against the Qing conquest on China's southeastern coast. The government strictly enforced the law, preferring to make mistakes in arrests rather than let them go, resulting in prison overcrowding. Yu Chenglong discovered that many people had been wrongfully accused and demanded a retrial. He fought tooth and nail to free thousands of innocent people. Yu Chenglong died while serving as Governor-General of Liangjiang. Tens of thousands of people attended his funeral, and the Kangxi Emperor made an exception and wrote a memorial inscription in his glory with the honor of the Son of Heaven. It was not only because he was competent and incorruptible, but also because he cared about the people. His actions can still serve as a model for officials in the 21st century. To prioritize the people, to cultivate conscience, to suffer the people's suffering, and to benefit all beings, to right wrongs and save people, to bless the country and people, and to bring peace to the world.
Thank you very much for this first video. And as I just said, it's always an enriching experience to share our panels with the Dizzy, who are on the front line of the fight for justice peace, and love. And so I will ask the first Dizzy to take the floor. Her name is Ting Yu Tseng. She's a senior marketing representative of an electronic company. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Willie. Hello, distinguished professors, experts, and guests. I'm Ting Yu, currently working as a marketing representative in an electronic company in Taiwan, and also Tai Ji Men Dizi. Today, it's my honor to join this forum in response to the International Day of Living Together in Peace. The day urges people to live in a peaceful and united way by respecting and appreciating others. Unfortunately, most people nowadays feel threatened by those who are different from them. For example, the violence of the majority leads to the violation of the human rights of minority. Or the conflicts between the nations result in wars and brings death and misery for the people. All of this make me understand why my Shifu Dr. Hong Daozi has been relentless in his efforts to spread the idea of conscious love and peace around the world. My Shifu, Shimu, and my brothers and sisters have visited over 300 cities in 101 nations on their own expenses and efforts for love and peace. My Shifu said, conscience is the key remedy to save the world. When everyone follows the guidance of conscience and has the courage to do the right things out of love, there would not be so many people suffering in the world. Especially the leaders of the world, their good thoughts at the moment can even prevent a war from happening. In 2014, my Shifu launched the movement of an era of conscience, encouraging people to do good deeds and spread seeds of kindness across the planet. With the joint efforts of the international community, International Day of Conscience was declared by UN in 2019 and is now celebrated around the world on April 5th every year. International leaders and representatives from all walks of life have affirmed the contribution of Tai Ji Men to world peace, including Taiwan's former presidents and President Tsai Ing-wen. Tragically, despite all the high acclaims, Tai Ji Men has been persecuted by Taiwan government for over 26 years. Many experts and scholars in domestic and foreign countries have been voicing out for Tai Ji Men. For example, Kenneth Jacobson, a practice professor of law at Temple University Beasley School of Law, has studied the Tai Ji Men case for years. He emphasized that there are numerous violations of law in the procedure of the Tai Ji Men case, and he called on President Tsai to solve it immediately. However, the NTB remained indifferent and teamed up with the Administrative Enforcement Agency to illegally auction off the sacred land of Tai Ji Men on August 21st, 2020. On that day, I was at the scene during the entire unlawful auction process. When the official announced the land had been nationalized, my heart was broken and I feel like I was being robbed, but I could do nothing at that moment. What a horrible violence from my country's government. In recent years, hearing many experts and scholars sharing their experiences and perspectives on Taiwan's taxation problem, I have realized that Tai Ji Men case is like a demon revealing mirror, highlighting the flaws of Taiwan's bureaucratic tax system. It is hard to believe that in a so-called democratic country ruled by law, some unscrupulous tax officials can issue the tax bills without evidence and do criminal acts to cover up their mistakes without being punished. Ridiculously, these few officers can even get bonuses on the illegal tax bills. And what is at stake here is the bonus system, which is on no legal basis, and is viciously leading to the over-collection of taxes and even the fabrication of tax evasion taxes. Therefore, if the tax system is not reformed, there would only be more taxation victims suffering from the tax abuse. Hence, in the past past years, I have volunteered to voice my demands on the streets and in online forums, hoping that more people would become aware of the Taiwan's poor tax system and urge the government to reform as soon as possible. The Tai Ji Men case is a fake case fabricated by Ho Kwan-ren. He staged this big drama and NTB played it outrageously, leading the entire government system to drive the stall train all the way to the wrong end. It has been 26 years till now, and many people don't understand why we are persisting so hard for the rectification, as it's wasting time to fight against the NTB. Why don't we just pay and free ourselves? In fact, over the past 26 years, we have gone through all the legal procedures, and the time and money spent on this case has far exceeded the amount on the tax bills. It's a matter of principle. It's for truth and justice. If Tai Ji Men gave in to NTB's demands, it would be like indulging the corrupt officials in torturing people with their abuse of power, and it would affect everyone in Taiwan. You can totally tell from the Tai Ji Men case, even with all the evidence of our innocence and government's illegal execution, the Tai Ji Men case still couldn't be rectified after 26 years. Then how about individuals without any resources? We can see that more and more taxation victims in Taiwan come forward to share their nightmare stories. It is heartbreaking to hear. Some of them are forced to separate from their family for years, and some are even deprived of the money for cancer surgery. It is apparent that their basic human rights are severely abused by the officials. In Taiwan, there are only 1.9 million of tax arrears cases in 2001, but this number has increased to more than 14.31 million last year. There are only 23 million people in Taiwan. Does it mean 1 in 2 people would encounter the tax arrears cases which might be executed forcibly? Recently, a taxation victim's quotation from a Japanese filmmaker, Kintano Takes, resonates with my heart. That is, the disaster was not one death toll of 20,000 people, but the fact that a person's death happened 20,000 times. It might just be a number when you hear it at the first moment, but it could also indicate that many miserable unjust cases happening behind. I will not just watch the evil happen without doing anything, or the next victim might be me or my family or friends around. Therefore, for the justice, I will keep fighting for the Tai Ji Men case until the day when it is truly resolved. Here, I sincerely call upon the officials to face the mistakes and correct them, starting from the vindication of the Tai Ji Men case. Meanwhile, I sincerely invite Taiwanese legislators to work together to urge the government to abolish the tax bonus and administrative bonus system and establish a clear mechanism to punish illegal officials. Finally, I'd like to take this chance to express my gratitude to the distinguished professionals and experts. Thank you all for continuously speaking up for human rights and justice. With the joint efforts, I believe justice will prevail one day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ding Yu Tseng, for your vivid contribution to this webinar. And I think that the otherness, a new concept that has emerged in the debates in the last decades, is always a challenge to the intellectual and psychological comfort of a majority. And Dr. Hong has for a long time understood that otherness can be a source of negative attitudes by a majority of people. And Tai Ji Men is different. It's different from the majority of society in Taiwan and outside Taiwan, because it is cultivating the highest values that Dr. Hong has transmitted to his generation of disease and to the next generation of disease. And that's why Tai Ji Men has become a target of stigmatization, of ostracization and abuse of power, in particular by the tax administration. But Dr. Hong has always taught his dizzy never to answer with the same violence, but to answer with love towards those who persecute you. Thank you for sharing your testimony with us. And I will now give the floor to Mr. Mark Yu, application engineer. The floor is yours.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and every friends online. Good afternoon and good evening. My name is Mark. I am currently working as an application engineer in the semiconductor industry, and I am also a Tai Ji Men Dizi. I got the chance to learn the art of self-reflection from my shifu when I was a child, and I learned how to maintain my confidence in a critical situation and how to handle things in an organized manner when under pressure. In a fast-paced, informational-rich working environments, we must practice listening to our inner voice or making conversation with ourselves. That I learned from Shifu is that at Tai Ji Men is that every problem is an opportunity to reflect. Mistakes or setbacks are no longer frustrations, but opportunities for me to grow and thrive. So as I previously mentioned, I work in the semiconductor industry, which grew aggressively in recent years in Taiwan. According to Morris Zhang, founder as well as former chairman and CEO of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which abbreviates to TSMC, he pointed out that there are 3 core values for TSMC become leading heads for semiconductor industry of the world. First, trust and innovation. And the second is strategy. The strategies for the enterprise to succeed, to grow, and to capture the market. Last and most importantly is execution. Morris Zhang mentioned that having good strategy and value are not enough to achieve such great success if we cannot execute precisely. However, while Taiwan's technological capabilities continue to advance, human rights awareness continues to regress. Why? So let's make a very quick survey on the awareness of human rights in Taiwan based on the core value proposed by the founder of TSMC. See whether Taiwan government meets the standard. According to a result of 2020 public satisfaction survey released by the Crime Research Center of CKSU in February 2021, only 26.7% of the publics were satisfied that judges can judge case fairly and impartially. So this means that there is up to 73.3% were dissatisfied. So this is a lack of trust in Taiwan's legal systems from the public. What's more is the fact that the head of Treasury can openly connive at his subordinates, tampering with official documents and directly hiding evidence that is beneficial to the people shows that government has no integrity. Nowadays, tax injustice cases are flying around, but the tax authorities refuse to use a debugging mechanism, such as Sections 117 of the Administrative Procedures Act, which obviously the lack of enforcement. And the Tai Ji Men case is also the best example for all these facts. And last week was the 3rd review of Taiwan's national reports on the 2 covenants. And international human rights experts were invited to Taiwan to provide observation and recommendations on the national reports. However, this report has become a false mask of government to cover up and evade the seriousness of the issue, highlighting the government's desire to cover up the truth. So this is a way to build up an image of the government as a human rights advocate while refusing to face the problems and the truth. Pierre Lorenzen, a retired Danish member of European Court of Human Rights, was particularly concerned about the current situation of Taiwan's rights to a fair trial under Article 14 of the ICCPR, and raised the issue of judge neutrality, recusal, and legal procedures. He believed that in order to achieve justice, the most important thing is that the judgments are enforced. Taiwan's current legal system are brought to the surface to the issue of judgment neutrality and recusal, which in turn has led to a situation where the people no longer trust the courts, which were once fair and impartial. In addition to legal system, the taxation of financial problems also jumped to the fore again. The long-standing, non-open, and transparent taxation systems and the tax incentive payments without legal source are the major drawbacks. For example, such wrong incentive systems will lead to tax abuse by tax collectors, and with enforcement of law, it will infringe on the freedom of people and undoubtedly treat people as thieves and aim at driving them of their poverty. Obviously, the unreasonable infringements comes from unsupported incentive bonus. That is even more absurd is that in Taiwan, people can be restricted from leaving the country without a court's decision, just for the convenience for tax collection, which directly infringes on the constitutionally protects rights to personal freedom. The Ministry of Finance and the Executive Yuan should conduct a comprehensive review and remove all relevant laws and regulations that infringe on personal liberty in order to preserve tax debts, including Article 17 of the Executive Yuan Act, which allows of indefinite restriction on people's residence for an unlimited number of time, and other relevant provisions scattered throughout different law and regulations. The fact is, such a law, which violates the spirits of the two covenants, is still used extensively, reflect that the executive authority should examine the contents of the law comprehensively instead of technically avoid the spirits required by Article 12 of the ICCPR. In addition, according to the statistics provided by government itself, the amount of tax recovered by means of such restriction accounts for only a very small portion, perhaps 1 or 2% of the total tax owned. So, but it is therefore in a violation of human rights, sacrificing the freedom of movement and freedom of choice of residence of countless people and violating the principle of proportionality. So where human rights are violated, 9 out of 10 are government agencies. This is what former President Ma Ying just said, and it is still true to this day. For every Tai Ji Men deeds, we have witnessed such violation by government authority on basic human rights for years in Tai Ji Men case. Although the presidents have enacted the two Covenant Act domestic laws, they have been enacting their legislation with sincerity, but they have ignored their implementation. The two covenants make the people extremely disappointed, especially the complete neglect of officials is even more heinous. For Taiwan's human rights awareness to improve, the first step is to stop ignoring these problems. When you can't see the problem, you can't improve. I hope that Taiwan's human rights awareness will move forward.
Hello. Technical problem. Hello. Have you finished or are you finishing?
Yes.
Please go on. Can you try to speak, please, to check if, okay, so got the message that it is finished. Yes, and so I wanted to briefly comment to say that the wealth of the teachings of Dr. Hong are really inexhaustible. Mistakes, steps back are really opportunities to move forward in life, he says in his teachings. And I'm sure that on your way to becoming an engineer in the application of semiconductors, you must have gone through periods of hesitation, doubt, and discouragement. But thanks to Dr. Hong, you've been successful on the bumpy road of life, and mistakes and steps back should never be hurdles that cannot be jumped over. The crusade for justice, for example, is a good example of the way that you all, the DZ, with a leader, a thinker like Dr. Hong, can really become the winners of that injustice that has been hitting Tai Ji Men for many years. All this with peace and love. Thank you for your contribution to this debate. And I will now introduce Ms. Lorraine Huan, a university student majoring in supply chain management. The floor is yours, Ms. Lorraine.
Thank you, Willie. Hello, distinguished guests, experts, and friends online. I'm a graduate student at St. Louis University and a Tai Ji Men 弟子. It's my honor to share my opinion with you on today, the International Day of Living Together in Peace. The day aims to uphold the desire to live and act together, united in differences and diversity, and to build a sustainable world of peace, solidarity, and harmony. As a Tai Ji Men 弟子, my Shifu taught me that conscience is the root of our mind, and the sound of conscience will lead us to the right path. Therefore, I regard conscience as the warrior that combats the evil and fights for living together in peace. Since 2020, the threat of coronavirus, economic problems, inflation, and wars have caused the collapse of relationships between people and even make people gradually lose their faith and trust in others. The way to rebuild the bridge of living together in peace is our conscience, and it is apparent that the alarm of the world crisis has reminded us to awaken our conscience for a sustainable future. At the same time, the Sound for Justice and Taxpayers' Rights of the Taiwanese people also constantly warn the offenders to face their conscience, correct mistakes, and appeal to the government officials to build an impartial tax system. Take Tai Ji Men case, for example. Tai Ji Men, suffering from the fake case symbolizing the violation of International Human Rights Covenant, has been tortured for more than 26 years. Tai Ji Men was abused by the officials of the Taxation Bureau that imposed unjustified taxes and heavy penalties based on fake evidence, fake witnesses, illegal indictment, and fabricated price from the prosecutor. The National Taxation Bureau disregarded the verdict that the Supreme Court proved that the Tai Ji Men is not guilty and continued to claim the same money as cram school tuition income to keep imposing the unjustified tax. The former Minister of Finance used to mention that there is no reason why the administrative agency did not apply the facts judged by the criminal court. What's worse is that the Taxation Bureau joined hands with the Hsinchu branch of the Administrative Enforcement Agency to hold an auction to forcibly take away Tai Ji Men's land, which was supposed to be the site for a self-cultivation center. Sarah Pozo Bravo, a professor at the Mexico University and a well-known columnist, indicated that Tai Ji Men case is important since it makes visible the siege and use of political power against a spiritual, law-abiding, and legitimately constituted organization. Although knowing my home suffered from serious torture, my shifu taught us to let go of resentment and correct these offenders through the power of conscience to prevent the next victim. Therefore, we took to the streets not only to ask for the government in Taiwan to face their mistakes, but also to tell more people that the tax law in Taiwan needs to be reformed. However, the government officials respond to us through violent acts. On September 19, 2020, a nearly 60-year-old volunteer was arrested and detained by police as an active offender for holding a sign in support of the Tai Ji Men case and was transferred to district attorney's office where she was tortured for 7 hours, during which time she was constantly threatened with verbal abuse and causing the volunteer to suffer from acute stress disorder. I am disappointed that the Taiwanese government, which is known as the beacon of democracy, keeps bullying people through violence, ignoring the respect of basic human rights, and depriving people of their freedom of speech. What our government has done makes me wonder whether I should go back to Taiwan after graduation. However, we won't give up fighting for justice, though, knowing that our government officials treat innocent people badly with public authority. What we are making effort to do is not only want to see the government officials face their conscience and correct their mistakes, but also want to see a peaceful and coexistent Taiwan. Stephen Anada, the president and co-founder of the International Committee on Nigeria, underlines the spiritual foundations of the notion of conscience. He noted that conscience should be educated and cite the Tai Ji Men case as an example of how the uneducated conscience of some bureaucrats create injustice and suffering. Good culture makes for a good education, and a good education makes for a good economy. Our shifu and shimu leads brothers and sisters throughout the world in 101 countries through martial arts and cultural exchange to deliver the message of love and peace and invite world leaders to ring the bell of peace to spread their true love and conscience to their people in order to raise people's conscience and create a world where love and peace can coexist forever. Meanwhile, Taiwan must start with the law. The government officials should acknowledge their faults, obey the law, and respect human rights and take responsibility for truly implementing taxpayers' rights, not only to let the young generation regain hope in Taiwan, but also to let Taiwan return to being a truly democratic and free country again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. And at the beginning of your presentation, you said that in the teachings of Dr. Hong, what is important is that, and I quote you, conscience is the root of our mind to fight against evil. And in that fight against evil, the search for justice is really a key word, a key expression. And it is a compass, that search of justice, a compass for all of you in your life. And I also was also impressed by another point that you raised, is that conscience of the others, first your own conscience, but conscience of the others should be educated. Education, I think, is the best peaceful tool that you can use to convince people that are maybe opposed to you in one way or another, or put hurdles on your road, on the road of your life. But good education, you said, leads to a good life, good, it's good for economy, and it's good for society. Thank you for sharing those deep thoughts with us. And we will now watch another video titled Lady Godiva on Horseback.
Lady Godiva was the wife of Leofric, Earl of Mercia. She was beautiful and dignified, and everyone loved her, but she was always frowning. The Earl couldn't help but ask her one day,
"Why are you in such a bad mood? Is it because the servants did not serve you well?"
Lady Godiva shook her head and said,
"The people here are full of worries, because you have collected heavy taxes, and everyone can't afford the pressure. I can't stand seeing them like this."
It turns out that in order to support the army's expedition, the Earl imposed a heavy tax on the people, causing them to suffer badly. The Earl and Lady Godiva argued about the tax, and in a fit of rage, the Earl said,
"Let them go, but the condition is that you be naked and ride a horse around the street, and I will announce a tax reduction."
The next morning, Lady Godiva undressed and rode naked down the street. Although the Earl wanted to stop her, he couldn't face it, so he rode behind her on another horse. Strangely, everyone closed their doors and windows, as if they had agreed to do so, and there was no one on the street, or peepers hiding in the corners to peep. The Earl was astonished. He brought her home and asked,
"How did you know there would be no one out on the street today? Is it worth the risk?"
Lady Godiva said,
"If you really want to help people, you don't have to expect them to return the favor, do you?"
So the Earl decided to keep his word and announced a tax cut, and the people rejoiced. Centuries later, English artist John Collier painted Lady Godiva to commemorate this story. Collier said, "True nobility is the courage to do something when you know in your heart that you should help others, without thinking about whether they are grateful for it, and without changing your mind because of others' response."
Yes, a very powerful story that was used in a painting, as it was just said, but also that emblematic story was the source of a film that I remember that I saw when I was young. If we could solve the tax problem of Tai Ji Men in that way in Taiwan, I think it will be done very quickly and there will be candidates. So now we go back to the next disease, Miss Daisy Su, teacher.
Hello, my dear friend. Good afternoon. I want to share a journey to learn love and peace with you. My name is Daisy, and I am an elementary school teacher. I used to be someone who really need affirmation from others, always being in self-comfort and self-doubt made me unhappy. But since I entered Tai Ji Men, Shifu has taught me the value of helping others and made me understand that helping others is very simple. A smile, a greeting, or even a good thought can help others. Thus, even if I don't have outstanding ability or jobs, I can still do my best to help people in my daily life. After that, because I can help others anytime, I see the value of myself. My heart no longer at us, and I also feel really good and happy. After learning to affirm myself, I'm also more able to affirm others and tolerate their shortcomings. Now I can see the small advantages of my students and give them affirmation and encouragement. This change has made my hands embrace my student become longer and bigger. Thanks for my Shifu, Dr. Hong Dao's teaching. Every day, I practice Qigong to get positive energy, face the people around me with a smile, and help people generously, creating harmony among people. Under the guidance of Shifu, in addition to take good care of myself, I also use my time to follow Shifu, to participate in many public welfare activities. In this process, in addition to learning to deal with situations and gain experience, I'm increasingly learning to get along with different kinds of people. To be honest, I'm often defeated and even want to run away. But Sifu always told me to resolve conflict with wisdom. So I understood that I couldn't just blame others. There must be something I could modify and just adjust myself in every conflict. Learning by examining myself makes it easier for me to resolve conflicts with others. When I see the flaws in others, which remind me of myself before, I won't have a thought of dislike, but treat them with understanding and tolerance, or even love. Seeing the changes that the practice brought to me, my parents and sister soon joined Tai Ji Men too. However, on December 19, 1996, a prosecutor launched an illegal search of Tai Ji Men Academy in Taiwan. Tai Ji Men is the ancient manpai of Qigong, martial arts, and self-cultivation. We cultivate ourselves and spread love and peace. However, because of the false report of the media, Tai Ji Men was accused of fraud, tax evasion, and even smeared as an evil religious group. At that time, my supervisor came to the office and told me that I had been cheated. My father also thought that my family was cheated because of me. Facing the pressure from outside, I had never felt so helpless before. I remember one afternoon, I took a day off. I went to Tai Ji Men Academy. When I entered the familiar place, I couldn't help crying. After 10 years of Tai Ji Men case, the Supreme Court finally made a judicial verdict of not guilty of fraud, tax evasion, or violation of tax code. In particular, the court has specially discussed where the indictment, which was used as the base for the taxation, is not adopted. Tai Ji Men is a martial arts group, well known both at home and internationally, promoting traditional martial arts. According to the income tax law, the red envelope was gift and tax-free. However, the National Taxation Bureau ignored the judicial decision, continued to tax Tai Ji Men illegally, and even nationalized Tai Ji Men's land in August 2020. For 26 years, Tai Ji Men 师父 and the 弟子 has been speaking to National Taxation Bureau about their mistakes through petitions, protests, demonstration, and forums. However, the officials are still not willing to revoke the tax bill. We, as a tax victim, understand the suffering and helplessness of human rights persecution. That's why we stand out to promote reform. During this time, I have participated in many conferences focused on human rights and the rule of law. Wrote articles to express opinion, to speak out for the tax victim, and promote law and tax education on the street with volunteers. I don't think it's easy to change from a victim to a savior. But my 师父, Dr. Hong Daozi, has a high vision and a bold love. Under his guidance, we won't be defeated by bad officials of the country or stop it helping people over the world. In my heart, people willing to give a hand to this victim are more excellent. Such a love of caring people is what I admire. And it makes me feel extremely honored to be with you. I'm also very happy to have the opportunity to share my process of learning love and peace with you. I hope that the efforts together with you can make human rights universal and the world more peaceful. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Daisy. And you said teaching is helping others. You're right. We help others. I was a former teacher. I spent more than 30 years teaching to adults and also teenagers. But we help others by sharing something that we have accumulated through our life, our knowledge, our experience, and so on. We communicate with others through teaching. But teachers also learn from their students. And their students also make their teachers richer, more open, and more human at the end. And I think that we have shared the same experience through our professional life, you in Taiwan and me in Europe. And now I am pleased to introduce the next and last speaker, Mrs. Ella Lee, Project Manager in the technology industry.
Thank you, Willie. Distinguished guests and dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Ella Lee, and I'm a project manager at a technology company, and I'm also a Tai Ji Men弟子. Today, it is a great honor for me to attend this webinar to talk about my perspective of living together in peace and the Tai Ji Men case. Tai Ji Men is an ancient Men Pai, which is similar to school, of Qigong, martial arts, and self-cultivation. And Tai Ji Men Qigong Academy is an international nonprofit cultural organization. And over the years, Dr. Hong Daozi, the Grandmaster of Tai Ji Men, and his 弟子 have visited over 300 cities in 101 countries, devoting more than 2 million man-hours in cultural performances around the world to promote a culture of love, peace, and conscience. And I'm very honored to join this love and peace endeavor with my 师父 and brothers and sisters because I'm part of this big family. The opportunities are life-changing and meaningful for me. And these experiences helped me learn peace on various levels. But the Taiwanese government has been cracking down on this widely received and highly praised group for over 25 years. The Tai Ji Men case, which we are discussing today, was a victim of a crackdown on new religious movements, which was started in Taiwan in 1996. Prosecutor Hou Kuan-ren fabricated false witness and evidence, falsely accusing the same amount of money of being the proceeds of fraud to be confiscated on the one hand, and the proceeds of tuition fees of a cram school to be taxed on the other. It's obviously contradictory. In 2008, the Supreme Court decision confirmed that Tai Ji Men was not guilty of any crime and tax evasion charges, and that all the Tai Ji Men, Shifu, and disciples who were illegally detained at that time were given compensation for their wrongful detention. Even if the ruling was clear and confirmed, the National Taxation Bureau still issued illegal tax bills to abuse Tai Ji Men. In particular, the Administrative Enforcement Agency illegally auctioned off the land that was designated for the Tai Ji Men's self-cultivation in August 2020. Obviously, it is a method for some officials to discriminate against and suppress the spiritual and religious movement through taxation. Today is the International Day of Living Together in Peace. According to the United Nations, living together in peace is all about accepting differences and having the ability to listen to, recognize, respect, and appreciate others, as well as living in a peaceful and united way. And in order to do so, all forms of discrimination and intolerance must be eliminated. The Tai Ji Men case reflects serious discrimination and intolerance by the government, as well as a conflict between the government and the people because of human rights violation, and that also leads to a lack of peace and stability of the society. Taiwanese experts and scholars said that Tai Ji Men case has reflected the injustice of Taiwan's taxation system, and there are many tax victims in Taiwan who have no way to seek help and cry in the dark. For the sake of truth and justice, Tai Ji Men refuses to give in, refuses to compromise, and they use various methods to inform more people about the current situation because they are fighting for a better living environment for other tax victims and Taiwan's future generation. I once got into a taxi after taking part in a tax reform protest. The driver told me that he was moved to see this type of activity because he used to own a medium-sized company and worked very hard to make it profitable. But he was very disappointed that the Taxation Bureau would still come to him every year to negotiate and force him to pay taxes that he should not pay. Later on, he became physically and mentally exhausted, so he closed the company and began working as a taxi driver. So similar cases are very common in Taiwan, and it gives me the confidence that I am doing the right thing and that there are many people whose voices need to be heard. Echoing the theme of today's webinar, peace also refers to the relationship between the government and the people, which is crucial in determining whether the people can live and work in peace and stability, which is also part of human rights protection. Last December, 25 international scholars and human rights experts wrote to Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen requesting that the 25-year-old case should be resolved. The letters state that the case is obviously detrimental to the hard-earned fame of Taiwan as a beacon of democracy and human rights, and that the Tai Ji Men case is in fact a test for Taiwan's program of transitional justice. Moreover, the letter ends with a paragraph that it is no longer only a group of concerned Taiwanese citizens. It is a larger international community of scholars and human rights activists that urges Tsai Ing-wen, President Tsai, to act decisively and urgently. As a Tai Ji Men 弟子, I consider it my mission to bring peace to the world. And Dr. Hong taught me various levels of peace over the years, including inner peace, peace between man and nature, and peace in society and the world. I learned to hear the voice of my heart. I talk to it and try to calm it down. By doing so, I gain wisdom to deal with ups and downs in my life. And Dr. Hong also told me that all beings follow the principle of heaven, and that heaven, earth, and humans are one. And it makes me respect all beings around me. Such a life lesson, I believe, cannot be learned through the cram schools alleged by Prosecutor Ho Kwan-ren or the Taxation Bureau, but rather through the culture of relationship between masters and disciples. Dr. Puxing Dali, Taiwan's ambassador at large of religious freedom, said that religious freedom is a universal value. He encouraged Tai Ji Men to keep fighting for human rights. And he said that the efforts by Tai Ji Men is to give the Taiwan government greater efforts to help Taiwan government to stand in a positive force of justice. Therefore, for the sake of justice, human rights, and peace, I hope that more people to know more about this case and Taiwan's current situation of human rights. And I would also like to use this opportunity to urge President Tsai to resolve this case as soon as possible and return the people to a society that values justice, human rights, and peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ella. And you said in the beginning that thanks to Dr. Hong, you had learned peace on various levels. Peace between human beings in general, whatever their differences, their otherness, peace between men and women, peace between whites and blacks, between all people who are different in various ways. Peace has also been my compass in my life since I was young, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I was an admirer of Gandhi and Martin Luther King at the time. And of course, I didn't know Dr. Hong in the 1960s, who was on the other side of our planet. But I'm sure that he deserves to join that gallery of all those like Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Delanza as well, who were against violence and against war to solve conflicts, because there is never any solution with violence and war, but who spent their lives and, well, quite often lost their lives in their search for justice between humans and also to spread love in their environment, close environment, but also worldwide. Thank you for your contribution to this debate. And we are now moving to the end of the sessions. I will give the floor for the conclusions. I will give the floor to Dr. Tatiana Kopalashvili, who will introduce herself and about what she's doing here in Belgium. I say here because we are both based in Belgium. The floor is yours, Tatiana.
Thank you. It is my honor to have a closing word at this event. I do confess that Tai Ji Men is not my direct area of expertise, but by listening to our dear participants now and at the conference hosted by our Institute for the Studies of Freedom of Religion and Belief, shortly we call it ISFORB, both academicians and DISIS gave valuable insights on the situation. It was very interesting for me as a scholar, but also heartbreaking to discover the Tai Ji Men case as a vivid example of how cultural perceptions, political legislative traditions, and mere human greed may cause a problem and bring it into a deadlock which stays unresolved for decades. Our dear presenters today have been reflecting on the issue from their areas of expertise. Dear Dizis from a variety of social contexts have testified that the issue remains pressing and unresolved, that it concerns them personally and affects the fundamental and universal human right to have freedom to believe. Rights of the representatives of Tai Ji Men are violated not only on the level of so-called forum externum to practice their beliefs, but they are forced to compromise their conscience, affecting the inviolable part of forum internum, to be a follower of a certain group or to think as a follower. By not going against this fundamental principle and not compromising their conscience, Tai Ji Men illustrates that freedom of religion and belief should remain as a separate right. Belonging to a religion is not the same as belonging to a sport club or a political party. By infringing on the rights of the Dizi, pushing them into an obvious but not fair way to resolve the confrontation, the government of Taiwan touches the very essence of the representatives of this group. It asks them to stop being who they are. Much was said about peace at today's meeting, you would agree. By looking at the examples of Molochais presented by Massimo and others demonstrated by our colleagues, we see that peace in society should not be taken for granted, indeed, but must be fought for. And the fighters for peace need to be recognized and set as an example. Today, even the idea of nominating Tai Ji Men for the Nobel Prize was raised. In the conclusion, I would like to add my short reflection on this notion of peace. In Slavic languages, in Russian as well, the words world and peace are homonyms. They sound the same, mir, right? Therefore, speaking about the fact that someone is bringing his peace somewhere means that he is bringing his worldview there. And everyone wants peace in the world, if you ask on the superficial level, but it is important to understand what kind of peace we are talking about and what are the ways to achieve this peace. The peace of the oppressor and the victim is different. And the authorities of Taiwan, together with representatives of the tax bureaus, also want some kind of peace. In their worldview, but in their case, tax department achieving peace means establishing rules which serve the strong and silence the weaker. This misinterpretation exists in every part of the world. The Ukrainians also want peace, repelling the attack of the aggressor. And the Russians also want peace, presenting it in the form of the restoration of the USSR. They also want peace in Georgia, the country which is an object of my study and country of my current residence. Achieving peace in Soviet Georgia was understood as building a society completely cleansed from religion. The worldview of the society in the post-Soviet Georgia made a radical shift and understood the peaceful coexistence as a dictatorship of one religious group, the Orthodox Church of Georgia, pervading all spheres of public life. None of the configurations gives the desired effect to achieve peace in the society, as it is built on taking into account the interests of one side and ignoring the others. Many also noted today that peace is not a given. You need to fight for it and fight with fair and peaceful methods. And that is a matter of your conscious choice. The recent vivid example for me was at ETF, at the conference where many of you were present, the faculty where our research institute is located. It hosts several refugee families from Ukraine. And we would naively assume that who else, if not them, know what is the value of a peaceful coexistence now. But after several weeks of cohabitation, it turned out that in new conditions, they did not find it easy at all to establish peaceful coexistence even among themselves. They day by day had to choose to maintain peace and find ways to run daily routine without clashes. Fighting for peace is a constant struggle of a humanity and duty of every individual. And this fight should be conducted peacefully, as Tai Ji Men does it, peacefully but stubbornly. Only by this form of commitment, the disease can turn from a victim, as one of the diseases said, into a saviors and become examples to the world of bringing a peaceful transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will give back the torch of peace to Hans to introduce the last piece of the peace seminar.
Thank you very much. It's just been very enjoyable to be with all of you. And I think we have learned a lot. I think we're now ready for our last video. Or is that the case?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we turn the screen to the video, please?
Unbreakable Bonds, Episode 7. Let's continue the story. Before the final criminal decision was issued on the unjust Tai Ji Men case, Tai Ji Men was illegally taxed for 6 years. The tax bills for 5 of the 6 years were issued by the NTB of the Central Area, under the jurisdiction of the Taichung High Administrative Court. The other one was concerning 1996, issued by the NTB of Taipei, under the jurisdiction of the Taipei High Administrative Court. At a Taipei High Administrative Court hearing on July 27, 2005, Judge Lin asked the agent of the NTB,
"Besides Tai Ji Men, have you also taxed any other similar organizations?"
The NTB agent replied,
"No."
Then why did the NTB choose to do that only to Tai Ji Men? If we are talking about an organization of the same characteristics, I can certainly understand the practice of analogous comparison. But the situation is that there's only one such organization and no other organization of the same nature has ever been taxed. This shows that this case is not common. In the interest of the people, rigorism should certainly apply. The NTB is required to provide a concrete theoretic basis and cannot just make analogous comparisons and consider it a cram school by stretching its interpretation. Tax collectors must provide a legal basis for administrative discretion. Otherwise, taxation would be like selling vegetables in the market.
Come on, look here. $300 per kilo.
Judge Lin from the Taipei High Administrative Court was well versed in tax law and was dedicated to reviewing the evidence thoroughly. On September 2, 2005, Judge Lin ruled in favor of Tai Ji Men, stating clearly that the NTB had failed to identify the facts according to the evidence. The NTB then appealed. In August 2009, the Supreme Administrative Court overruled the appeal, ordering the tax bill for 1996 to be revoked. Since the Supreme Administrative Court had already issued a decision, those who are not familiar with the administrative litigation would think the case is closed. However, in Taiwan's legal and tax systems, the Administrative Court sent the case back to the NTB, which recalculated the tax amount and issued a new tax bill to Tai Ji Men, causing the people to fall into an infinite cycle of requesting a recheck of the case, appeal, and administrative litigation. Filing a case in the United States Tax Court. It costs only $60 to file a case in the U.S. Tax Court. People have the option of either appeal or going through administrative litigation. Once a taxpayer enters the administrative remedy process, the IRS will immediately stop the enforcement. While in Taiwan, people entering the administrative remedy are required to pay 1/2 of the tax amount or provide a collateral in advance. For example, a man with a tax bill of 60 million new Taiwan dollars must pay 30 million new Taiwan dollars or provide collateral. Otherwise, his case will be transferred for enforcement, and he can even be banned from leaving the country or be arrested or detained. Although the law was amended in December 2021, changing 1/2 to 1/3 of the tax amount, that still violates people's human rights. The procedure of administrative remedy, the infinite cycle of a recheck of the case, appeal, and administrative litigation. Even before the legitimacy of the tax bill has been confirmed during the administrative remedy procedure, the NTB can enforce the execution. Moreover, according to research, among all tax litigation cases in Taiwan, only 6% of the taxpayers win their cases against the tax authorities. That is, 94% of them lose their cases. Even if a taxpayer is lucky enough to win the case, the administrative court does not make a final decision about the tax bill, which will then be sent back to the NTB. The NTB only plays with the numbers, then again, issues a new tax bill, the never-ending tax bill. The judiciary's dysfunction in monitoring the executive branch and resolving disputes between the government and its people has caused taxpayers endless suffering. In April 2004, the cases concerning the tax bills for the other 5 years were heard by the Taichung High Administrative Court. While all of the 206 attested that the red envelopes for Shifu were gifts, the NTB of the central area lied, saying only 5 attested they were gifts, and it refused to provide the respondents' actual responses. In October 2004, Judge Huang Shuling stated in court that the Tai Ji Men case would be dismissed, and that Tai Ji Men should not obsess with the survey results. On December 2004, Judge Huang Shuling was suddenly transferred to the Supreme Administrative Court. Su Wufeng, the succeeding judge, proceeded directly with the oral argument without conducting a preliminary session. On May 25, 2005, the court ruled to withdraw the tax bills for 4 years, 1991, and 1993 to 1995, and maintain the tax bill for 1 year, 1992. With the same facts, same evidence, and decided by the same judge, how did it end up with conflicting decisions for 1992 and the other 4 years, 1991, and 1993 to 1995? This logic is akin to cutting an apple into 5 slices, and 4 are apple slices while the other one becomes guava. You heard it right. Such contradictory and illogical judgments did occur in Taiwan. On February 5, 2005, Administrative Penalty Act was promulgated, based on the principle that a criminal decision supersedes an administrative one. No administrative sanction should be made before the criminal decision is issued on the case. According to Article 177 of the Administrative Litigation Act, Judge Su should have stayed the trial and waited for the criminal decision, which applies higher standards for the intensity of investigation and evidentiary weight to determine the nature of the income. However, without waiting for the final criminal decision, Judge Su rushed to issue his decisions, which contradicted the facts and evidence. Tai Ji Men then appealed to the Supreme Administrative Court, where Judge Huang Shuling was one of the judges deciding the case. She participated in the first trial investigation but failed to recuse herself as required by law. As a result, Tai Ji Men lost the case for 1992. Before laptops and projectors were common, the chivalrous Tai Ji Men Dizzy Hong purchased expensive devices to better present the case during petitions. Carrying heavy equipment and materials, he and other Dizzy made petition trips everywhere, explaining the unjust case. In the past 25 years, as of 2021, over 300 legislators have accepted Tai Ji Men's petitions, gave counter-signatures, questioned bureaucrats, held press conferences, public hearings, and coordination meetings to reveal the NTB's violations of the law, requesting the NTB to withdraw the illegal tax dispositions. However, legislators, without administrative power, couldn't do anything with the two-faced NTB that talks the talk but doesn't walk the walk. Dizzy were exhausted fighting a long battle for justice. One night, Dizzy Hong excitedly told Zhang Menren.
A legislator offered to help negotiate with the NTB on our behalf. We will only need to pay a little money to settle.
Hearing this, Zhang Menren said solemnly.
I teach my Dizzy to tell right from wrong.
He then instructed Dizzy.
We pay the full amount of what we owe but do not pay even a penny for what we are not supposed to pay.
When it comes to legality and tax justice, it's either right or wrong. Since then, no Dizzy would ever suggest to Zhang Menren again to pay a little to settle. This concludes this episode. Dear viewers, have you taken anything away from this story? You should pay all the taxes that you are required to pay, not a penny less. But you should not pay any of the taxes that you are not required to pay. Because the people couldn't get meaningful assistance through this broken tax remade mechanism, the control yuan had to intervene. What would happen next? Please watch the 8th episode of Unbreakable Bonds.